Are we live? Can we talk? Nice, nice. Hello, everyone. How are you today? It's early in the morning in Brazil, but in Japan, it's night. This is amazing. And today we are here with not only a great executive, but the CSO of Zeta Division and other companies that we're going to talk about today. So you're gonna learn a lot, I know for sure, about gaming and esports market, not just from Japan, but from around the world. But Daniel, I think it's better for you to introduce yourself better than me, of course.
Okay, so good morning, good day, and good evening for the rest of the world. This is Daniel. So I'm the global CSO for Zeta Division, aka the Ganymede. So yeah, we are the currently biggest esports organization in Japan, and I'm mainly just watching all the global expansions as well as the business development and all around the esports and out of esports for Ganymede minimum. So really nice to see you.
Nice. Marcelo está dando eco. Aí. Okay. So the first curiosity I have, because I was searching through LinkedIn and I saw that in your description you majored in media art. How was that like transition from media art to a role that's really like managing strategy, and it's pretty different, you know? So I wanted to, this is the first one because I was like, wait, media art university, how did I come?
Okay, so media art is actually a pretty virus or a big kind of major for. I mean, it's a pretty big industry since when we're talking about media art, it's actually the media is not the traditional media like televisions or like newspapers. It's around the new expression using the new technology, using unseen impressions to do something artwork that nobody have seen yet. So when I was in the university, the media art, aka not only about the computer graphics, also about robotics and about AI and about early reality like the VR and also the augmented reality thing. So I'm a pretty, I'm say, geek guy from the very beginning, like when I was very young. So I just touched the Game Boy, I touched the family computer, the PlayStation, the PC games as well. And I always like being very, very interested in like get into the new things, including the computer games. When I back to the primary school, I just play some Counter-Strike 1.6 with my friends at school or after the school. And when I get into the mid-high school, I just play the Monster Hunter like every other Asian boys did with the PlayStation Pro. So yeah, I mean, I'm really, really into technology things. And while I graduated from the university, I actually entered into a consulting firm to solving the business, I would say, issues or business problems for the biggest corporations in the world with the knowledge of the new technologies and also a kind of media art because there was a thinking called design thinking, which was very useful in the business world, which is not thinking from the top down, like thinking from the issue, but thinking about the user's experience, how people can feel something memorable, how do they like prefer a brand to B brand. So those kind of things just connecting me from my hobbies, which is like technologies, games, and new things, just in general, new things into business. But after that, I had the chance to go to the esports world. While I used to be in another esports organization called Fnatic. So I had got a chance to talk to one of my childhood hero was called Kang, who is the current CGO, the Chief Gaming Officer of Fnatic, aka Patrick. So when I talk to Patrick, I say, "Well, that's the guy I know who is a Counter-Strike 1.6 legend." But actually, after thinking it was a kind of blue ocean in Japan about esports, and I helped Fnatic for a couple of years get into the Japanese market. and actually became the biggest global esports brand in Japan. And yeah, I mean, my mission's done, and maybe I should try some new things. And actually, my one of my friends just building a startup after I left Fnatic. So I just helped my friend's startup for a couple of months. It went well, and after that, someone, or aka the CEO of the division, just came to me said, "Hey Daniel, can you help me like doing some global expansion things using my knowledge of like global esports?" I say, "Okay, why not? Yeah, I maybe can have some of the knowledge you might be interested." So that was the story began and how it was going. So.
Nice. It's so amazing because you went from a team that you brought them from Europe and like um help them in Japan, and then Zeta comes to you and asks you to globalize the team. So it's like it's so interesting. I really like that about your story. And uh, going a little bit back before we get to Fnatic and Zeta, you did study at MIT, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, I
But
did.
yeah, I would like to know, because you said that in your media art major, you learned a lot about like the user experience and other other technologies that you can use to help these corporates to thrive. And my first question would be, how did MIT change the way you look at a gaming like roster, but not just a gaming roster, but the market itself?
So my major in MIT is actually how to integrate artificial intelligence, which is AI, into actual business things. So it's more likely be an MBA rather than just a master degree in MIT. So it's like slightly different. But I would say because the date I learned in MIT or MIT Sloan Management, the artificial intelligence itself is actually before the boom of the LLM, aka the ChatGPT thing, or we have the Grok from X, and we have other like different tools on the market, which is very very intelligent, and basically you can use them very easily. But back to the days is more on the, for example, auto formation and about how to make the business itself more efficient. So when I thinking about things, definitely I just thinking from the very beginning why it works and how does it work. Not like how has it been and how the business itself for long, for example, for a long year, why it have been success. So in that way, thinking about the environment in Japan, the esports environment in Japan, is pretty unique to any other countries. Because the gaming industry in Japan is actually, I would say, one of the longest in the whole world, the history of the gaming itself. We have Nintendo, we have Sony, we have massive game developers, we have a lot of publishers in Japan, and all the guys, even it's 44 or in the 50s, Super Mario Brothers. They know about Sonics. They know about like Metal Gear Solid. But in that way, actually, console games was too strong in Japan, and PC games are not that popular back to the days in Japan. Or actually, PC games just became popular in back to like 5 or 6 years in Japan. And before that, because of the esports itself, is very related to PC games back to the days, especially when the PC games became a thing. It was like StarCraft, it was Warcraft 3, it was Counter-Strike, instead of the games on the consoles, on the PlayStation, on the Super, SEC. So in that case, I would say it was very, very hard to just to say, hey, get into the esports, into the Japanese audiences, and say, hey, esports is so interesting, please watch it. It was so hard. But instead of that, thinking of how the gaming community, how the gamers are looking at the ones who are really, really good at the game, how to build the community itself, and how to compare esports as an entertainment, as a culture, comparing not into the gaming itself, but I'm not really sure if the connection was all right, but
I think
was
it's
that?
back.
Oh yeah, I'm back. Okay,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
so good, good. So how do you think we can make esports itself being success in Japan is to compare it with other kind of like entertainment out of gaming, comparing it with music, comparing it with movie, and nowadays we have Netflix, we have a lot of like streaming cultures. So all of them are like because we have so many choices on the ground, and the thinking of which of them to be the best choice for the audiences is the key that we get this success in Japan. So, and I do believe it works in the rest of the world as well. So, think from the very beginning was the thing I learned from MIT the most.
Nice. And I'm gonna jump a little to another subject, but um, you previously talked about being a representative, not just a representative, but director for Fnatic Japan. And my question is, what was the biggest challenge of bringing a Western esports giant to this unique Japanese market that you just described?
Um, Actually, from the branding wise, it was not that difficult to do for Fnatic. Why? Because actually we got a massive investment from a trading house in Japan, which is called Marubeni. We actually got like 80 million US dollar, which is like a massive money from the trading house. Because of that, we actually had like plenty of a budget to thinking of which kind of game we can enter into the Japanese market, which is the most popular one, aka Apex Legends. So we didn't have an Apex Legends team before we entered Japan, but because this game was so big in Japan, all the streamers, all the content creators are playing that game, even including the celebrities, and thinking of like how we can make the best team possible in Japan was a key to get into the Japanese market. And thinking of the relationship between the content creators and pro gamers, I would say making that ecosystem in Japan is extremely important. So we just got the right place, right step from the very beginning. We got one of the biggest content creator in Japan called Spygear for joining Fnatic Japan from the very beginning. So we actually have the cross relationship between the famous pro gamers and the content creators. We actually built a really really good ecosystem from the beginning. But thinking of difficulties, yes, definitely, because Fnatic most of the staff are living in the UK, and because of the time zone difference and also the language barrier, it's very hard to find local staffs working in Japan. And like doing a lot of things for doing the communications with the local community, and also like doing the business development things, working with the HQ stuffs, which is very very difficult. And also, I do believe it could be slightly better in other part of the world, but it's very, very hard to find a bilingual person in Japan, which is most of the people just speaking Japanese, and very little of them speaking English, and very little of them speaking, for example, Korean, Chinese Mandarin, or I would say, Portuguese, for example. But thinking of who can speak English, Japanese, have their business mind. Are they interested in esports world? Can they, work with us in a different time zone? That could be a very hard for recruitment, which could be a lot of issue for almost all the corporations in the world, not only in the esports world. So
Okay, okay.
yeah,
I think
challenging.
that's a challenge for Brazil too, because when people come here and search for professionals, sometimes the time zone is a big problem. But I think English is I think it's almost the same here in Brazil. So it's interesting to know that this happens in Japan too. And going to the next one, what do you think it's the biggest misconception that traditional business executives have about the esports industry? Or does it have one? Or does it has there's no misconception at all?
Um, that's a very good question. Um, because I had like a couple of the experience in, Fnatic, which is quite different the ones in the division, to be honest. Or AKA like thinking of the traditional corporations in the rest of the world versus the traditional corporations in Japan, which is a very traditional ones, are quite different as well. But from my personal experience, I just want to just like speaking about the situations in Japan. And actually, because of the esports, have the part of the sports in the noun itself, there is a argument about if esports are real sports or not. So I would say in the rest of the world, maybe people doesn't care about that one. But in Japan, because of thinking of esports, if they are going to do some partnership of things, whether that belongs to the sports relationship department or the business development or partnership department, that could be like a total different story, could be a total different budget. So they are just trying to figure it out if esports, real sports or not. But to be honest, that doesn't really care. And all of us know esports World Cup have been pretty success for a couple of years, and there's esports Nation Cup coming. LC is actually getting into the esports world as well to attracting younger generations, and there are more younger kids playing Fortnite than playing soccer, football, and basketballs in the primary schools. So and also actually we are having a very very exciting, I would say, co co-development with the University of Tokyo, thinking of how to strengthen the performance of the athletes, not only about the traditional sports athlete, but also about the esports world, the esports athletes, the esports players, using the latest approaches in the sports science scientist world. So in that case, thinking of like if the academy is very interested in the esports itself, why the traditional company is still thinking of okay, if esports having enough of a engagement, if the younger generations really matters, do they really want to reaching out the younger generations? I would say in different countries they may have different plans, and in different industry maybe they have different targets, but definitely all of us know esports is an excite exciting thing, and the content itself is so attractive. That's why the younger generations are really getting into that. uh, think of the ROI. It can be good, it can be bad, but it's all about the community itself. If the community is younger enough, if the community is stronger enough, I would say after 10 years, after 5 years, after the community itself getting I would say, for example, older and have my more power for purchase itself, definitely that community should be in the short list of the ones they want to reach out, they want to targeting. But start from now, getting into the esports world, doing the things, doing the promotions is the easiest way and the most budget thing to do in the longer term, from my point of view.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting that you brought this different this because I agree with you, because a lot of people have this misconception about like they always ask like is esports a real sport, when it's like it's more than just this question, you know. We have, for example, in my area, which is communication, the broadcast, lots of esports broadcast, they get made like the format from the traditional sport, and this is changing from all these years to something that's more casual, that's more directed to the younger audience. So I love this subject. I think it's really interesting for not just for us as people that work in esports to know, but for the fans too. And going to the next, right now we have like a new guest, which is my cat that just sat here. Oh, this is Mia, guys. But let's go. Okay. Oh, this is a very good one. This is one that I'm really curious about because as a CSO, which was a role that I didn't know before and now I know of. Before you answer this question, if you want to just say a little bit about the responsibilities as a CSO to the people that are watching right now. But the question is, how do you balance? Mia, stop messing with the camera. Wait a second. Uh, how do you balance the long-term corporate goals with the high variance nature of competitive results? Because esports is a very rapid and always changing market, and even of the like the results of the teams. So how do you manage those long-term goals with this?
So I would say, first of all, what is the responsibility of the CSO? So CSO stands for Chief Strategy Officer, which is basically being responsible for the company's strategies. So my role is more on the global side of the strategy itself, and also thinking of like how the division, like Ganymede, be a more global company, and we must reach out the global standard. So knowing the global standard and knowing the right decision we are aiming for, it's my main responsibility. So it's more on a, I would say, macro thing instead of a micro thing. Like just chasing the numbers. It's not my job, it's the CFO's job and maybe the leader of the business development job. But my role is to say, hey, after 5 years, after 10 years, how our um, corporation, how our organization should be and could be, and what is the right thing we must aiming for. So in that case, like thinking of the performance of one title, two titles is not my main responsibility, but definitely because those matters can change the strategy pretty rapidly. If, for example, one of the big titles just shuts down, or there's like another, I would say, new esports title are coming out, in the next year, for example, in 2026 or 2027, are we going to enter that scene? What kind of thing they can bring to us? How the community itself will interact with the game itself, interact with the esports ecosystem, all the things really matters. And I would say, as a esports organization, the only stream we can, I would say, basically the pro gaming is not the only stream we are getting revenues. We have a lot of streams. So besides that, for example, we have content creators, we have massive event productions, which is like I do believe that is the top of the world. And also about the merchandise, about the partnership, about the business development, and also about the education. We have a lot of pillars. We have a lot of streams. And what kind of goal we are seeing, for example, for the education as the top sport of the esports in Japan. We are the top player already in Japan, but how shall we be a idol for the younger generations, for the guys hasn't been an esports player or has been very young. I mean, just like 5 or 6 years old. How we can build a brighter future for those kids, that could be the responsibility for myself and the things I'm thinking the most right now. So it's a pretty, I would say, macro thing instead of like short-term thing.
Mhm. Um, so I know you just said it's macro, but for example, you in Zeta, Zeta hired Jacob Mini Harris, as a coaching advisor for the Valorant team. And this is a micro decision, but did it affect your like macro strategy, or is it's just something that you expect from um this corporate how to say, like progress, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, that is linked to like how to bring the organization itself into a global standard with like a one small step, for example. So let's just call Mini as Mini because I never call him Jake.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's easier.
there's a like player called Boaster whose name is also Jake, so that could be very complicated if I say Jake or Jacob in the case. So yeah, so Mini is a very he is one of the best coach in the world, and it could be a little bit big topic. And if I say there's no good coach, Valorant coach in Japan, because some people must be pretty angry at me. Hey, there is a good coach. Hey, there is some coach actually works for a team. But thinking of the globe from the global standard, I would say there's no coach as good as Mini in Valorant scene at least. And it's not only about the strategy thing, but how to build a team, how to build a structure. The main goal of having Mini as a coaching advisor, not coach, is so may I just explain what is a coaching advisor? In super short, it's the coach for the coaches. So basically, he's coaching the coach. So he's coach's coach, which is a little bit complicated.
Nice.
So he, what kind of thing he's coaching the coaches? Yeah, definitely he will just review the votes, the records of the player playing the game itself. But he will also giving advices how to, optimize the structure of the team itself, the competitive team itself, and how to, manage the relationship between the IGL, the in-game leader, and the coach itself. Not only about the strategic thing, but also about the mentality and also about the structure itself. So I would say from those kind of insights from Mini, what we can learn, the ultimate goal is not just making our Valorant team being better, but actually making the ecosystem, making other teams being better as well, making the whole environment being better. That makes our team become stronger. That may become making the, I would say, Valorant competitive scene or Valorant competitive community more excited about the game itself. If we get better results, it just make everything better. Having Mini, so I'm very glad that Mini is welcome to join the division for as a coaching advisor, which is very exciting actually.
Yeah, that's really amazing. I really like. I watched. I watch Valorant since like the very beginning, and when I noticed that Mini went from Fnatic to Zeta, was um, a really interesting move from him, and I think it's um how do I say, like a coach's dream to work not with just like different people, but like a completely different environment. So I think it must be really interesting to work with him. But I want to know about the difficulties too, because the Valorant team faced significant roster changes and injuries in 2025, such as Dap's injuries in his shoulder. So my question is, how do you manage a franchise player crisis from a strategic perspective?
Yeah, I mean, things happens. That is the answer. So, all we can do is try our best, build the best roster. And technically, Mini didn't come from Fnatic directly to the division. Actually, he was used to be a assistant coach for Paper Rex in the championship. So, and in the Paris Masters Paris, and actually helped Paper Rex get the trophy, which is yeah, he's a miracle coach. He's very good. And thinking of the significance of the roster changes, I would say it's pretty similar in the division and in Fnatic. There are pro gaming decisions are not directly I mean connected into the business decisions, which is the executives definitely will have some comments on like if we can get player A, who is very popular and competitive and have a lot of fans in the communities, we can definitely, get a bigger sponsor or something like that. But actually, things doesn't work like in that way, because there are a lot of like conversations on the ground between the players to each others, and maybe only the team managers or sometimes the team directors knows what's happening on the ground and how the players are managing the relationship to each other, and also who has the best condition, who has the worst condition, and what kind of way we can take, what kind of thing we can do to improve the team as a whole team. Because the Valorant is unlike like the games like Street Fighters is more on the individual plays. Valorant is a team play game. So although maybe we can have one of the best, players, for example, a Brazilian player, Aspas, being the best in the world, uh, I would say even have one or two players, it can be, making the team into bigger competitions. But thinking of the synergies between the players, it's very, very hard for an executive like a CEO or CSO to making a decision, say, hey, please do this, hey, please do that. What we can do is actually to support the team, support the competitive team of our biggest effort. If the things happens, what we do is to explain to our sponsors, explain it to our partners, saying, hey, what happens? What could be the next step? We are trying our best to, making the team's condition to be the best and being the most competitive way. And definitely, as a move, we are making Mini as a coaching advisor. That can be one of the, best move we can think as executives to make into a competitive team. But if that could actually work or not, it all depends on the daily based communications, daily based conversations on the ground. And it's very, very hard to catch up those kind of conversations. But we are trying our best to have like a weekly meeting or even like by daily meetings with the managers, with the directors, catching up the details, catching up the random conversations from the team. That is the things we are doing right now.
And talking about all this staff around the team, when the like when do you need like a decision for changing the roster? Who is involved in this decision? Are you involved? Is the CEO, the CFO, is like all the executives and the manager? How do you do this in Zeta right now?
Definitely.
Mm.
Yep.
Ah, okay. Do you want
Cool.
me to repeat, or
No,
is it
no, it's
okay?
fine. Just
Okay.
yeah. So definitely the finance team and CEO like secure a budget so we can have enough money to make the roster change definitely. But other than that, it all depends on the the competitive team itself. So we have the one who are in charge of the Valorant team, who is basically being responsible for all the roster changes. But also we are very, very respect into the coach's idea, the head coach's idea at the moment. And also we are, as we have one pillar of the player who playing as a IGL in the in-game leader, aka we have Sugar Zero at the moment as a IGL, and he is the core of the team itself. So we listen to him, we listen to the coach, we listen to team director. The team director decides the roster change thing, and we just negotiate with other teams, like knowing the transfer fee and knowing the other conditions, and getting to the finance, getting into the CEO, like let just discuss together. Do we have the budget to do it? And if we do that with a very, very high transfer fee, what could happen next? So that's it.
Nice.
Hopefully that could be the answer.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Just a second, guys, because my cat is throwing stuff around as a cat always does, but I'll be back in 2 minutes. I'm back. Okay, so we have a question from Masarti Raj Kumar. I'm sorry if I mistaken the pronunciation of your name, but he is going to he asked you, Daniel. Fnatic used to be one of the top organizations in PUBG Mobile community, but now it's disappeared. So, what are the challenges faced, and how can you get that back on track?
PUBG Mobile, okay, we had an Indian team, yes, which is kind of sensitive if you know the background of why we had, actually, we were forced to do that decision to disband the team, because actually the game itself was banned by the, by political reasons. If you are interested into that background, maybe you can search for that because that is pretty sensitive. And learning from that, I would say we can't just have, you know, um, we are not pre-announced before the decision was down by the from the political reasons, definitely. And what we know is that the players won't be able to play the game anymore, which is heartbreaking. And that was a very sudden thing. Actually, that was like right before I joined Fnatic, so I just talked to the executives at Fnatic and gathered the news in the news site. But what I learned is that, yeah, definitely mobile games are very, very exciting in a lot of, I would say, markets. And actually, in Japan, mobile games are pretty big. We had, as the division, we had a pretty competitive roster in Identity 5, which is a game from NetEase. We actually just won the last World Championship in 2025, which has happened in China. And we just won as a Japan championship last December, just last month. And as mobile game, it's easier for players to get into because not everyone have a PC, but almost everyone have a smart device, such as smartphone or a tablet. And just having the easier access to it, that means the player base of the game itself is way, way bigger than even the console games and the PC games as well. It easily just getting it to 10 millions or like couple 10 millions of the player bases into the mobile games, which is very hard to reach it on the PC. So in that case, like thinking of the value, getting into the mobile games, definitely that is the area which the division is getting into, and I do believe Fnatic is pretty, interested into that one as well. But thinking of the competitive roster, thinking of like which kind of regions are more competitive as a global organization, because Fnatic have the access to any player in all the countries, so which is can make the decision a little bit harder to make. That is a good thing, but a complicated thing at the same time. So hopefully that could be an answer for you.
And about the mobile gaming market, your entry into Mobile Legends was incredibly fast and successful. But what is your checklist, if there's one, for deciding which game titles are worth this like $1 million investment?
Good question. Good question. So, I do believe that could be the same for all the esports organizations at the moment, because I mean, 3 years ago, like thinking of getting into a new gaming title is pretty different, comparing to the one from 2024. And what happened is that the EWC, the Esports World Cup, happened in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia every year. So We're gonna have one in 2026 as well, getting the new game titles. And why I'm mentioning that because the Esports World Cup makes a whole totally different ecosystem for all the esports organizations, making entering a new esports title being a different thing. Not thinking about the official tournaments a publisher could hold, not thinking of the third-party community events, like how we can balance the prize money, for example, and transfer fees and the daily OPEX, the operation expenses. Uh, Instead, we can have some support fee from the EWC Foundation. We can have like if we win couple of the titles at the EWC, we have like a champion, no, the club point. And if we get like a higher ranks in the club point, we have like a significant prize money from the foundation as well, which makes the investment and making decision of investment pretty different from 2024. And that's the same for the console games, that's the same for the PC games, and same for the mobile games as well, as there are a lot of like mobile titles such as MLBB, the Mobile Legends Bam Bam, such as Honor of the Kings, such as like other titles as well, are entering EWC and ENC. And more details, I believe, will be announced around the ENC, which is Esports Nation Cup, very soon. And as the Esports Nation Cup will be not only for one club, for like one esports organization, but be maybe more than two esports organizations, rosters, and combine into a national roster, just like the Olympics games. I would say that could be a different story, but the ecosystem itself will be as excited as EWC from our point of view.
Nice. I'm really excited for the Esports Nation Cup because like as a fan of many organizations, you in the world champs, sorry, we already like as Brazilian fans, we are very passionate about it. And it just imagining a Brazilian team with the flag is just like it brings esports to another level. But um talking about a downside of esports, because in the past we had the esports winter, and for some people that don't know, after the pandemic, esports had like a big boom, and then we just like lots of organizations went down, um, and this has hit many teams globally. But why has Zeta Division been able to continue expanding while other are like downsizing?
I would say because we think the esports itself pretty differently. Like comparing, I mean, there are a lot of like esports teams still good, making like doing very good. Not only from the competitive point of view, but also from the management point of view as well. So why the esports winter camp? Because the esports summer just come before the esports winter, to be honest. Um, so during the pandemic itself, everyone just stay at home. So the choices of entertainment itself, how they can entertain themselves, the choices were very limited. Like staying at home, watching some Netflix, play some games by themselves, watching the content creators streaming on Twitch, on YouTube, or watching the esports tournament. So esports tournament actually these days, esports itself are not like competing only into like the indoor hobbies, for example, Netflix, or like play some games himself, watch some televisions, watching the movies, or it's just a competing with the traditional like environment itself, entertainment itself, like for example, just playing some sports outside, or like having some winter sports, have some skiing things. So how the division seeing esports is that the mission itself for the division is enriching the gamers lifestyle itself. So how we can enrich the lifestyle by various ways, not only thinking of the esports, but also making the gaming thing, making the event around the games, making the content creations more excited, more attractive, and more, valuable for all the gamers, for all the audiences. That was the goal. So as we had very, very high quality, for example, event productions, we just had a massive event happened in Tokyo, like holding more than 20K people in the venue, having a lot of like content creators get together, play some games, play League of Legends and play like other in real life games, maybe some like TRPG as well in the game event, and how to broadcast it, how to make the content more interesting, how to make everyone come to the venue and watch online, entertained, is the thing that hadn't been changed before the pandemic, during the pandemic, after the pandemic. So that is a core, and that is a main value of the division, making the business itself a success, not mattered to the environment outside the esports. The pandemic mainly.
And in this gaming lifestyle type of like not type, like an identity of Zeta, and I really think this is the key for a successful like business in esports, is thinking like outside of the box. And talking about this, you just launched a not just launched, but um you are exploring the VTuber part with Ultra LMTM. And I wanted to know your perspective around these virtual influencers. How do they help? How do you interact virtual influencers with your real athletes that are working in Zeta? Like, how does this work? How do you connect them?
Actually, VTuber had been a concept in Japan for a really long time, and VTuber have been like very, very big, very, very popular. If you are watching at the viewerships, and also the super chats on YouTube is all on the rankings, and maybe the top 10 all VTubers, like Japanese VTubers, on the ranking right now, which is pretty, I would say, impressive from the not only the marketing perspective, but also from the in general. If you are watching like the televisions, like random televisions in Japan, actually you can see some virtual VTubers appearing on the very, very traditional television programs, and maybe even like during the New Year event, you can see some random virtual avatars on the television, not only on the internet at the moment. And the big companies like Sony have like some music labels, Sony Music. They have already signed some virtual talents on the ground who are very, very good at singing. And a lot of like Japanese artists are not like showing their face. They are not VTubers, but they are not showing their face. They have like a very good talent of singing itself, making the songs. One example is Ado, which is Ado, who is like a girl singer, very, very good talent, but she is not like willing to show her face. Why like explain those kind of things? Because the the main reason we are getting into the VTuber market, I would say pretty late comparing to our competitors, is because one of our influencer, one of content creator called Kassen, is a big content creator in Japan in League of Legends, and he is like holding a league tournament called League the Kassen, and there is like a couple of the VTubers attending into the league itself. And Carson just had a very good sense of like how the community is interested in, and how the community is interacting with the talents, not only about the real talents showing their faces, and also about the virtual talents who are VTubers. So Carson saw a lot of potential. There are so many interesting guys or girls on the market, not discovered yet. Some of them have some reasons don't want to show their face. Maybe that's kind of Japanese thing because we have anime culture and we have manga culture for a really long time. So people are really getting to have some avatars instead of like showing their faces on the webcam. But I would say it's just a one more expression of like how we can show in talents in to the market, to the audiences, not thinking too seriously about if that's a virtual talent or a talent with a webcam on, but instead we're just thinking of is there a interesting enough talent who can just make some like noise into the community, who can make the esports itself more exciting in Japan, and also how we can attract more audiences, how we can like make everyone's life a little bit more, brighter in everyday life. So everyday life, that is our goal and that's our ambitions as well.
Nice. And with the rise of these virtual personas, but not just that, for example, with AI that we mentioned before, what does a career in gaming look like 5 years from now for you?
Um, like specifically talking to the VTuber thing, naturally it's not in Japan, but there was a Western AI-based VTuber or virtual talent called Neurosummer, which is launched. I can't remember the date of when it launched, but actually I have seen like a couple of the talent itself having some streams online, which doing a game called GeoGuessr, just like guessing random place on Google Map. And definitely AI can guess it easier, way easier than like a human being talent. But if we just get everything like getting to AI without any interactions with a real human being like talents, that can be a little bit boring because like AI just do things right. AI just do things from the algorithm. At the moment, it can be changing like 5 or 10 years if the AGI actually coming in. I don't know if AGI is coming like in 2025 or I mean, back to the days we call 2045 a singularity year, where the AI can actually go beyond human being. But, the time limit is coming like way easy, earlier. Like people are saying, maybe 2035, the AI can actually reach in the AGI and go beyond human being, have like doing all the things that can a human being do. And but thinking of that, what the kind of main purpose that like human being living, what kind of thing we can do? Are we still doing the creative things? Are we still like having things being entertained? Are we going to be entertained by real human beings or entertained by AI thing? Um, that could be a good, very good question. I don't have the answer yet because like I do think it's too early to do the conclusion at the moment. But what I see is that because making some attractive event and making the operations behind of the event production and make the event itself success need a lot of resources, need a huge of effort from the human beings at the moment, and a lot of like work which is like repeatable and I would say at the moment we can already use some of the AI agent, and some of them we can just use LLM to resolve those kind of problems, making the works itself more efficient and release some of the resources, which makes our, I mean, staffs being very exhausted sometimes right before the event itself, which is a good way to use the AI. And I do believe AI can help us a lot, thinking of from the resource perspective, like from the management perspective as well.
Okay. And we're going to the three last questions, unfortunately, because our time is coming to an end. But the first last question is we're gonna go a little bit back to the esports winter because the question is the current esports winter a sign of industry failure or simply the end of the road for organizations managed like hobbies instead of businesses?
Okay. I mean, you can build a business from your hobby, but don't do a business as a hobby. I don't think that's the right thing to do because as a hobby, you can just make do all the things you want to do. Yeah, even though you have like enough budget to do the things you want to do, it could hurt the other stakeholders in the ecosystem because of the lack of the like think of the decisions, and also because there is a like kind of balance between all the stakeholders in the ecosystem, and I would say the esports itself is still there. Because of the games, people are still playing the games. There are still like a lot of people are competing in the esports. I don't think esports gonna just disappear in like 5 or 10 years because the esports winter thing actually came. But instead, I do think we have to really think it twice about what is the right goal, what is the right direction of like building a business in the esports world, how to operate the esports team in the right way. Are we just overpricing the all the esports athletes in different titles because some of them are heavy investment heavy like has heavy investment and some of them are not, and some of the new publishers are putting a lot of marketing budget, for example, into the scene and making it bigger without like thinking too heavily, too deeply. So those kind of questions can be more and more clear after the esports winter. And I do believe that is the same in all the industries, not only in esports. After the bubble, 20 years ago, I mean, if you are just establishing an IT company, you can just get a lot of tons of investment from that one. But right now, you have to have a proper business idea. You have to have a proper business case to, start a new project in IT industry. That's going to be the same, and that's happening in the AI world right now as well. So I don't want to talk too much about AI because we are talking about esports right now. But esports world is actually getting more healthier. I mean, esports are still there, and the esports won't just disappear like nothing because it's a real business from my point of view.
Yeah. And talking about investment, with content creators often offering a much higher return of investment than professional rosters, how do you justify the massive costs of maintaining pro teams today? This is a tricky one.
So yeah, that's a kind of tricky one, but actually we are using the content creator thing and the event production, merchandising, partnership, all as the engines, like the heart of the human being, to bring the all the bloods into the whole body. And basically, as the what we want to do as a division to enrich everyone's gaming culture, gaming life. So definitely esports is the top of the pyramid of the gaming itself. So we really want to maintain like very competitive rosters, but actually like thinking of how to make the presence of esports players itself in the whole entertainment world. How can we get like more viewership to the esports scene itself? Not only like making the content creators like co-streaming the streams, but also we actually asks the content creators to have some code streams with the player themselves to build a whole ecosystem, not only between the content creators versus content creators, the esports players versus esports players, but to bring them together. So actually, after the retirement of some of the esports players in their division, they just become a content creator for the division, and there are a lot of examples in Zeta. And what we do is that to not just saying, hey, balance the content creators and pro players, but just think as a whole thing. Think them as a whole organization, how we can make them work to make everyone's life a little bit like more enriched, I would say.
And for the last question of today's interview, with Ganymede's launch of Ultra LMTM, are we seeing a shift where owning a digital IP, such as VTubers, are safer than and more like profitable than managing human athletes and creators?
Actually, VTubers are also human creators, but the
Yes.
only yeah, yeah. But the only difference is that are they using a digital avatar or a using a face cam? So actually, VTubers, I would say there are a lot of like risks and concerns, just like the content creators, managing the content creators. They are basically the same, but the only difference is that we have to thinking of the whole tech system, catching the face, like capture their face, capture the movement, transfer them into like live 2D or 3D avatars, let them move. Other technical things are already, and how we can manage them into integrated them into a in real life event. For example, we have to prepare a real television or like real display to show the avatar of them. They're standing along, standing beside the in real life content creators or the pro players at the same stage. I mean that kind of technical thing, but I don't think like VTuber is a digital thing. We are thinking of I don't think that's a I say symbol of a digital IPs getting over the real IPs. No, definitely no. They are just using a digital avatar, which is like kind of cute, kind of anime, and a lot of people are loving that. That's it.
So, Daniel, thank you so much for joining me and Esports 101. It was amazing to hear. And for me, actually, it was really easy because you are a very talkative and it's really enjoyable to talk with you. So it was amazing. If you want to leave like any last words or invitations for the audience or even like the next Zeta's match or event, it's your space right now.
Yeah, actually, we just launched our 2026 jersey 1 hour ago. So go check it. And if you are interested in that, we are going to sell that on this Saturday. So yeah, please make sure to get in the card because it's going to be sold out in 10 minutes. Average, actually, it's just sold out in 3 minutes. So
Oh
yeah,
my God.
just that. And yeah, it was an honor to talking to you as well. And hopefully your cat is like have a good day as well as you. And I believe we are just living in the opposite side of the, the sphere. So it's very early in the morning. So thank you all to have a listen to the stream, listen to the live stream in very early morning. And yeah, everyone have a good day.
Thank you. Bye bye, everyone. See you in the next chapter of Esports 101.
Thank you.